and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, affectionately known for the last 40 years throughout the United States and internationally as the Money Lady. And through this venue, my viewers over the years have been able to get the necessary information, resources, learn things that will enable them and their families to thrive during these very challenging times. As always, I'm honored and delighted to be here, and thank you for allowing me in your presence and in your home and with your families on today's segment, which is a part of a series that I'm doing. And I rarely do it, but this is so needed right now that you want to sit down and you want to listen, because I'm going to be doing 5 shows. That's right, 5 shows on the subject matter that I'm covering today. That's how important it is. We are living in changing times, and you need to know what is out here and what you need to do to prepare or even to be a resource for other people, including your family members who are caught up in this very, very serious thing. And we know we've got a lot of things out on our plate today that are serious, but I'm honing in on this subject specifically because it's officially out of control and just terrible. So I'm here today to talk about domestic violence in America, the global situation. But I live and am a citizen of the United States of America. And therefore, the focus of this show and the shows over the next 5 segments is going to be dealing with domestic violence. And we're going to start from the very beginning. No holds. I'm going to discuss all of this openly. Encourage your feedback. You can email me at mygraves@gmail.com. You can call if you are concerned and want to make a difference. And you should, because of so many people who are involved in this. Unwillingly, I might add. But on that basis and from that perspective, I bring you my guest for the next 2 segments, and that is Jane Keiffer. She is the Executive Director of the Artemis Center, which is headquartered in Dayton, Ohio, and it is a domestic violence resource center. Now, listen to her attentively. She's been the Executive Director for 7 years, but she has been with the Artemis Center for 27 years. And that gives her a perspective that very few people that I have met and talked with as a part of preparing for this show bring to the table. So she's going to be sharing her seasoned understanding about domestic violence. You need to know that Artemis Center is going into its 40th anniversary. I tell you as a truth, viewers, I am 72. I cannot believe that we are still dealing with this issue in America. I just can't. And that is why I'm bringing her on for these next 2 shows to lay a foundation on the problem, give an assessment of where we have come from and where we're going. And in the next session, we're going to be talking about the culture of violence in America. It's deeper than guns. It's about guns killing people, of whom many are wives, girlfriends, etc. So without further ado, I'm going to go on and introduce my guest for the hour, Jane Keiffer, Executive Director of the Artemis Center in Dayton, Ohio. How are you?
Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Oh, this is such an honor. What a tough business.
Yes.
Ooh-wee. Let's begin by talking about you.
Excellent.
and how you wound up doing this. Domestic violence is, by its very name, has all kinds of connotations. But let's talk about you.
Sure.
Okay.
So I went to the University of Kentucky to get my master's in social work.
Okay, in Lexington?
In Lexington.
Oh my goodness.
Go
I'm a
Wildcats.
Kentuckian. Love myself some Lexington.
Yes.
Okay.
And there is when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And I eventually came back to Ohio because I'm from Ohio. I'm from Northern Ohio.
Okay.
And I landed a job at Artemis. I mean, it really is that simple. I started as a victim advocate in 1996
Oh my goodness.
and started serving survivors at the court. I was an advocate at the Riverside Court for like 2 years.
And what does that do? What does an advocate do?
So an advocate really is there to support the survivor, really empower them to make decisions, because we know abusers take choices away all the time. And so we really help them decide their path. So a court advocate usually meets them at the court, a criminal court.
Okay.
because
It is
they're-
a criminal matter?
It's a criminal matter.
Oh, okay, okay,
So if the
okay.
abuser was charged with domestic violence,
Okay.
I would meet with the survivor out at court and kind of explain what to expect from the court process, because we know the courts can be overwhelming and the information doesn't always make sense to the typical layperson.
Okay, continue.
So
This
we
is
would
interesting.
explain the court and then help them have their voice heard. So we would help advocate with the prosecutor, or we do help advocate with the prosecutor about what they want to see happen with the case. Sometimes people may want the case to go away. Sometimes people may want them to get some type of intervention. Sometimes people want them to go to jail. So it really depends where they are. And then we kind of help advocate, but also help manage expectations. So if it's an abatter's first time of being charged criminally, they're not going to go to jail.
Okay.
That's not going to happen.
Okay.
So we're there to help manage that expectation and provide support. And always overarching safety planning, always talking with survivors about what's the best thing that they can do for themselves and if they have children to keep themselves safe.
Yes, yes. So let me ask you this, because I want to understand this court process. When it gets so real that you are now in court, how does a victim wind up in court?
So typically, if they were to call the police,
Okay,
a police report is done.
okay,
And in the state of Ohio, it's a preferred arrest, not a mandated arrest state, but preferred. So meaning someone should go to jail, but they have to make sure that all the criteria were met in order to charge somebody with domestic violence.
oh my goodness. And what is that criteria, may I ask?
Threat to harm, threat to kill,
harm, threat to kill. Okay.
actual physical harm.
Okay,
So that would get you arrested for domestic violence. And it's a family or household member. So you live with someone, you're in a relationship with someone, you may not be married, but maybe you have a child together. That's considered domestic violence.
so if a person is, as we look at social media today and all of these transient type of things, what if the person doesn't live in the home as a part of the household, but is a boyfriend or a girlfriend? How does that work?
So it would be charged as an assault, which parallels
Ah.
the same consequences of domestic violence.
Okay,
And I don't want to jump too ahead, but we'll talk about
Okay.
protection orders.
Yes,
but,
yes,
but
yes.
it differs a little bit there. But it's the same. If they can't make the relationship, then they will charge the person with assault. So if the batter says, I never lived with her, and she can't prove like through mail,
Okay.
then they charge them with assault.
okay. So it's still a criminal matter.
Still a criminal
Because
matter.
if you're not living with her and you do this, then it's
Yes.
a
It's still
criminal.
against the
It's
law.
still
So,
against
yes,
the
good
law.
hands, yes.
Okay, that's very, very good. So it has to, a call has to be made. And the reason I'm taking the time on this, Jane, is because I want everyone to leave this interview with an understanding of how things have to proceed. And it's not willy-nilly, that there has to be, to get the police involved in this, and I do believe they should be,
Right.
because it's a violent occurrence, you have to first call the police.
And you, as a victim, doesn't necessarily need to call the police. Your neighbor can call for you.
A neighbor can call as well. Another family member?
Another family member,
Okay.
a bystander can intervene in this situation
And call the
and call the
police.
police.
And the police will come.
The police will come, and then they usually separate the parties because,
Okay.
again, it's very scary as a victim to say, this is the person hurting me. So they separate the parties to get their stories.
Okay, and that's a very scary position for the police. Because I would think if there's a gun involved or some kind of a weapon or instrument, and they come in as outside parties to a very emotionally charged environment, that can be kind of challenging as well, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and the other part that makes it really challenging can be, you would think, oh, the survivor called the police because they want the abuser gone. But sometimes what happens is the victim realizes the batterer is going to go away and the batterer has been blaming us for the violence the whole time. So now I'm afraid if they get arrested, I'm going to be in worse shape.
Oh, the financial.
The financial, right. And because the batterer's not going to stay in jail long, right?
Correct. They
So
have to
when-
post bond.
When they post bond and
out
they get
again,
out,
and they come back.
they come back.
Oh, my words.
So then
Oh,
I might be in
my words. Oh, my
worse
goodness.
danger. So sometimes when the police arrive, I'm like, most victims want the violence to stop. They don't necessarily want their abuser arrested. They just want the violence to stop.
Well, at some point, it will stop. Either you're dead, or you're unconscious, or you fled.
Right.
And that doesn't involve police intervention. So my question is, are many of the victims opting for those other alternatives of fleeing or to keep the police out of the story, to
Yeah.
keep it from becoming criminal?
Sure. I think people do try to keep the police out. And there's another option that you
Okay.
can file a protection order. And you don't need a criminal case, but there has to be an incident of violence.
Okay, documented? Not necessarily.
Nope. So you can go to, here in Ohio, we call it domestic relations court,
Okay.
and then you file for a protection order. And again, in Ohio, it can last up to 5 years.
5 years. Can it be renewed after 5 years?
It could be renewed, but there has to be a reason that you want this to continue. It can't be just because I've already had it, I still want it.
Uh-huh.
There has to be something that happened in order to ask for an extension.
The continuation. This is all very, very interesting. And how many people, so you started your career being an advocate in the court system. And were you assigned these women, or was it just a part of your job description?
Just part of my job description. So when I started, I served victims of domestic violence in Riverside Court. So whoever went through the Riverside Court process, I met with them.
And how was the typical experience?
I think it's overwhelming because
Oh
I
my
think
God,
that many,
yes.
especially when you work in the system, we believe that everyone understands the system. But if you're new, and one, you've been assaulted,
Yes.
so that's overwhelming. Two, now you have to, as the victim, you're like the witness in the case, and now you have to say, yes, this person hurt me, which is really hard and scary. And again, we typically love our abusers. I mean, it's not like, oh,
That is something, oh my goodness, Jane. That is something I can't wrap my head around. And for all the work I've been doing in preparation for this series, the incredible love that the victim has for the person that did this. Are they all empaths? Is this what we're looking at, narcissists and empaths?
no,
God
we're
crazy?
We're looking at, now you have to remember, the first time an abuser puts hands on you, it's not right away, right?
Okay.
So research tells us the first time an abuser typically assaults us is we moved in with them.
Okay. Not them with you.
Either way, we
Either
move
way,
in.
you
We move
moved in.
One.
Okay.
Two,
Let's stop right there. Viewers, rule number 1. Do not move in with a person that you really don't know. And I don't care what the societal expectations are, and I'm in love. Keep your own space. it's cleaner and safer, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and actually what we call a red flag is early involvement. That abusers,
Early involvement.
So abusers
So they
want to-
hook that in. Boy, it sounds like a daggone narcissist. But anyway, continue. I don't
So-
want to prejudice the interview.
So I move in with you. I'm pregnant and I have a baby with you.
Okay, so now you're prego.
Yep.
Okay, so you're going to move in with him, or he's going to move in with you, and a baby's on the way. Boy, this gets messy. Okay, keep on.
And then the third one is after I marry you.
So you are going to get married. They get married.
So I'm saying the first time of physical violence happens. So it happens either after we move in, after you're pregnant. So you may not be living together, but now
But
you're
you're
pregnant.
yes.
Or you may not be living together or pregnant, but now you're married. And that's when you see. I've talked to several
Oh, my
survivors who
goodness.
share violence that happened on their honeymoon.
Violence that happened on their honeymoon. Okay.
So it's this ownership, like it's this thought process that the abusers have that now I
Own you. Property. Establishment of control.
Yep. It's all about control.
This is going to be good. Let us continue. So you did 2 years in that capacity. And what did you learn that you didn't know before?
That the criminal justice system can be really hard in terms of people. I think a lot of people watch, a lot of crime shows on
Oh,
television.
yeah,
and they
court
think this is
TV,
gonna be
yeah,
all-
yeah,
and-
yeah.
And court takes a long time, and sometimes the outcome isn't necessarily what you want. So. I think people believe, they're going to get all this kind of help and treatment, and it's just not there.
And was the court really ever designed to do that?
Right. I mean, it's the
On a criminal
justice court,
system.
right? And so survivors, it's harder for them to have their voice heard. But I mean, I always think about it again. I love this person because
Yes.
I've married them, I have a child, all of this. And now that I'm responsible to hold them accountable to say this is their behavior. And that's a really scary, difficult place to be.
Yeah. So the victim actually takes a different role where they have to speak against, because the court system and the criminal, when you said it's criminal, I mean, that's real precise about documentation and witnesses in many cases. And then they have to speak to the court on their own behalf. They have to swear in, and they have to give testimony, help me here, about what happened to them
Yes.
or happens to them, plural.
Yes.
And are they facing rebuttals? Like
They can. A lot of criminal cases, and again, from my experience in this community, a lot of cases, so it's set for what's called a pretrial and then a trial. And a lot of times the case is over at the pretrial, so the victim doesn't have to get up on the stand to testify.
Okay.
But she still has to share with the prosecutor what she wants to see happen. So I think
Is he representing her at that time? The state?
prosecutor, yep.
Okay.
So it is actually a crime against the state of Ohio. So it really is the state of
Okay.
Ohio versus
Versus
the
abuser. Okay.
As the victim, I'm the state's witness.
Got you. So, but the abuser can obtain representation
Absolutely.
to defend his position,
Yep.
which means she is possibly subject to cross-examination.
She is.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And then a decision is made, jury or judge?
Usually judge. Usually it's made at the pretrial level, and the prosecutors, the two attorneys work it out and present it to the judge.
Okay.
And the judge kind of
Signs off. Yeah, okay. And what typically is the outcome?
Probation, usually get some terms of probation. Sometimes you might have to complete a batter intervention program.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
What is a batter intervention program? So there's really no assurance that this is final. It may not be final.
You mean the violence happening
Yeah.
again? Oh, right.
I mean, the court has,
Right.
but they haven't click, click, click.
Well, I think what's really important to remember is abusers aren't held accountable and don't take responsibility. So if I'm abusing my victim, I'm saying to her, it's all your fault. You didn't do this. You should have done that.
You
blah,
made
blah.
me do this.
You made me do this.
Man. Okay.
So if the courts don't hold him accountable, or we'll say him because mostly it's
Yeah.
men, but don't hold him accountable, then again, they're still lacking accountability. So the likelihood that it's going to happen again is pretty
It's
high.
pretty high. If you are dealing with that situation as an isolated, and I don't believe they're isolated. I would like to believe that he lost it, but there are too many statistics and dead women.
Right, we all lose it. Right?
Yeah, we lose it,
But we
but you don't beat up people.
Right, right.
I mean, no.
It's a choice, right?
No. But, so you did that for 2 years. You came away with an impression about the judicial process for this. And so what did you do next?
I then moved courts. So I moved from Riverside Court to Dayton. So I moved to a bigger court system.
Okay.
More prosecutors, more attorneys. And I was there for several years. And then I supervised our hotline.
Oh my, with women calling in. Oh my goodness. What was that like?
Incredible. I mean, I think it's pretty incredible that I say it all the time. I think it takes a lot of courage to pick up a phone and call a stranger to say, I'm being hurt. And I'm amazed to this day, 27 years later, it is an honor and a privilege to pick up that phone and talk to somebody.
I would have to believe so. What has been your typical experience with those phones?
A lot of times people, well, there's nothing typical. So that makes it hard.
Okay.
So some folks are really just interested in support. Like, is this domestic violence? I'm not sure. Because again, it's not, we're not being attacked all the time. And domestic violence the emotional abuse typically starts first, right?
Okay, so give me a situation when you talk about emotional abuse.
So it's kind of like making you question yourself. Emotional abuse in terms of there's like isolation. So there's an example of you and I are going to go out as girlfriends, but your partner saying to you, you like Jane more than you like me.
Oh, okay.
So now you have to decide.
Him or her.
Right. And maybe you decide me. Maybe you say, I'm going out with my girlfriend. Then you get home.
Oh my God.
Right. And there's consequences. Or you don't go out with me, but there's still going to be a consequence, right? And so now you're being more isolated because now you're losing your friends because you keep calling off on us because you don't want to
Right,
deal
so
with.
we stopped calling you.
We stop calling you. And it's the emotional abuse of, we always say it, kind of making you feel like you're crazy. So
The term today is gaslighting.
Gaslighting.
Okay. For those of you that don't know, that's real.
Right. And it could be as simple as I hang my keys up on this hook every night, and then the morning I grab them and I go, and then one morning they're not there, and I look and I look and I look for them. They have no idea where my keys are, and then interesting enough, there they are. And they say to me, they've been there the whole time.
Oh my goodness. Let me just repeat to you. Are you saying that you go to work, you pick up your car keys, and you go to your car every day, and then one day the car keys aren't there, and you're tearing up the house trying to find your keys because you could have sworn they were there, and then voila, they're there.
Yep.
Oh my God. Now that is criminal. That'll cause you to go cuckoo.
Right. But it's not criminal. I can't call the police to say.
My spouse is lying about my keys.
Correct.
But if done enough, you would begin to wonder what is happening to you.
Right.
You begin to question your mental stability.
Absolutely.
Is that the desired outcome?
Right.
The victimizer, he wants to drive her crazy?
Right. Well, he wants the focus all on him, right? So all of the focus, all the attention is on him. And so what happens is I lose sight of me. So I now have no idea when we start working with survivors, we'll ask simple questions like, what's your favorite color? And some people don't know, right? Just because they've lost themselves completely in this relationship.
My words. I'm not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, but I've been doing a lot of research on childhood trauma and all of that in a master class I'm in, and been in for 2 years. And I am telling you, that is really going on as a presaged, because it escalates. It's not just that.
Correct.
But it's about putting, beginning to build a cage around the person, isolating them, and then making them believe that they've gone crazy. With the end result of what?
Just them never ever leaving the abuser. Like they have total control over them. So they're not going to try to go to school. They're not going to get a job outside the home. Like they are all focused on this one person.
Whew. Children. If children are involved, what happens? Oh my God.
It's hard. It's hard when children are involved. I think our kids hear and see a lot more than what we think they do.
Oh, I know they do. This is a smart group.
Smart group. And I think it's really important to say, we know domestic violence is a learned behavior. Abusers are learning this behavior at home, in their communities. And so when children are watching this, they repeat the pattern, right? So our goal is always to break the cycle of violence. And so it's helping them understand what healthy relationships are because they're not seeing it in the homes.
Right.
So there's a high likelihood if children grow up in a home where there's violence that they're going to repeat the pattern. And again, that's not every child. I've talked to many people who've grown up in homes that have not been abused or been victimized, but there's a high possibility of
Well,
that
children replicate at a certain age. If that's all they see,
right.
that's all they see. And they're going to do what they see because they don't know any different.
Right.
Do other family members circle around while this is going on the victim or victimizer side?
That's a really interesting question. I think we witness the abuser's family kind of ignoring it more so than holding them accountable.
And is that because the abuser's family did it themselves, like the father
Right.
did it to the mother?
High likelihood, yes.
And he replicated his father's behavior.
Right.
The mother's not going to say anything because she's lived through this
Right.
and may still be living through it.
Absolutely.
I mean, nothing personal, but Archie Bunker was real. Archie Bunker and Edith, that was a real dynamic for a lot of people.
Right.
The cowering, compliant wife, and then the daughter. I mean, that was Norman Lear was a genius.
Yes.
That's all I can say. He was a genius. So the abuser's family doesn't touch it, but they know it.
Right.
And the victim's family, what?
Sometimes they don't know because we try to keep it hidden, right? It's embarrassing. We don't necessarily share what's going on behind closed doors because either I can handle it, it's going to get better, I don't want them to think poorly of him.
Got it.
Yeah.
Hoo-wee. That's tough but I know that the family has to know because the victim's going to begin to manifest behavioral activities that suggest something is amiss.
Right. Well, they will probably be less involved with the family, but you also have to remember sometimes batterers move us away from our families as part of the isolation piece. So we don't have the contact we once did. And on the phone, and if I'm on the phone and my abuser's nearby,
You're not going to say much.
You're not going to say much. And then when the family comes, we're going to pull it together for that weekend. Now, not that survivors don't share. I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, it's so totally secret. But I think it's harder because I think sometimes survivors do share and say, but he really is a great guy. He's only bad when he X, Y, or Z.
Right. Is alcohol from your experience at this level, alcohol, drug abuse, is that a part of the profile of the batterer?
Right. I think it's important that alcohol does not cause the violence, but it plays a part. Because we know there's a lot of sober people who are violent, right? And vice versa. But we know that drugs and alcohol can escalate the situation.
Okay. Okay.
And just like, batterers will say, oh, I was out of control. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm going to call bull on that because
You and I know.
we do know. Because if you think about it, batterers are destroying my stuff, not his prized possessions. It's all about it's my heirlooms, it's my grandmother's, it's my children's, whatever that is, because he knows the sentimental value that it holds for me.
So what happens if she destroys some of his things? Does that accelerate his agitation?
Right. This is a really good example. Sometimes victims fight back, right? They're being assaulted and you may like push them off or fight back. And then I've heard this so many times, then the batterer will say, look, you're hitting me, you're just as much as an abuser. And then they increase their violence.
Oh my God. Oh. So if you try to set boundaries, physical boundaries, and try to protect yourself, particularly if there are children involved, or if they hit the children, and you respond in an aggressive way, then they will accelerate because now the boundaries really are clear. And that is that there's no way I'm going to let you get by with that.
Oh, right.
So then that is a very conscious, deliberate decision.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand this psychology because the issue of men globally doing this to females, and of course I've lived in a number of places. I'm sure in some of the places it's more acceptable than others, but the fact that it is global gives me cause for concern because where do you go with this?
Right.
I mean, for real, where do you go with this? So she pushes back, he retaliates and becomes even more aggressive. And at no point is there intervention?
Depends
Tell me.
if the police get involved.
Okay, if the police don't get a...
She could, again, for us here at Artemis, she can call Artemis. I mean, you don't have to be involved in the courts. You can call and say, hey, I need support, and we can provide that. It really, again, but we really work for an empowerment model. Like, really, what do you want to do? Because I'm going to take the long way here, but we
That's
also
okay.
know it takes 6 to 8 times to leave a relationship on average.
Wait a minute. 6 to 8 occurrences?
Leavings. I leave and I go back. An average of 6 to 8 times.
And go back. And leave and go back. Does the abuser disengage?
No, the abuser's trying to get you back.
Okay, so he's doing just fine.
Yes.
Food's not on the table, but he is doing fine. And she has to disrupt her life and the children 6 to 8 times
Yes.
before it clicks that he's not going to change. Is that the change model? Do they think they're going to change?
I think part of it they think they're going to change, but also we have to think about there's resources. So if the batter's controlling the money,
got it.
Where am I going to go? How am I going to afford first month's rent plus deposit?
Right.
Gas.
Right.
Childcare.
Right.
Groceries.
Right.
It's expensive. It's very expensive. I mean, just the common, if I wanted to leave, how am I going to pay for everything?
That's a good thought.
Right.
That's a real thought.
So do I live in my car with my children?
Ooh.
Or do I go back to the person that I married?
And deal with his madness.
Right.
At any point, does the court, if it gets to the court procedure, do they deal with anger management as a part of court recommendations that, sir, you have a problem, and if we put you on probation, that must include anger management?
So some of the courts have what we call batter intervention program. We don't call it anger management because, again, you get angry, I get angry.
Right.
It's different. It's really about batter intervention, you making the choice to use violence. And there are some programs, if you go through our date and court system, you can be court ordered to do that program.
Okay. And what is the ultimate goal of that particular intervention?
To help you unlearn everything you believed about how you treat women, how you think about women. So here's just one example. In batter intervention programs, if you're participating, you must call your partner by their first name. You can't call her the bitch or
Sweetie.
or whatever.
She has a name.
She has a name and she is a person.
Yes.
So it's just starting that basic.
Okay. You know what, Jane? I want to feel, I don't want to be, at my old age, I don't want to be a cynic. But at the point you have to teach a grown man to refer to his wife or significant other by their name to denote recognition of their personhood, that doesn't give me a lot of hope. It does not, because you're now trying to untangle what caused that person to be that. Mm-hmm. And from your experience, is a lot of that tied into childhood trauma?
So absolutely, that can be tied into childhood trauma.
Where they were never loved, wanted, validated?
Well, yes and no. I think yes, but I also think some children grow up in a home where there's violence, that their mother does love them, but their father is abusive. And so that, again, you only know what you know, what you're witnessing. And not that doesn't involve trauma. Like watching your mom be hurt, that's traumatic.
Or you being hurt.
And that's, I was going to say earlier, that's a really good point. When we talked about kids, we know children in the ages of 11 to 13-ish want to protect mom.
Right, and particularly I think the males.
In particular, the boys.
The boys are not gonna,
And so they want to protect mom, and so then they get hurt. So maybe dad trying to throw a punch at mom, and they jump in. Or sometimes kids are injured inadvertently, meaning batter goes to throw something, and he misses and hits a kid. So yeah.
Well, the reason I bring that up, and we'll talk about this more, but the New York Times did an incredible article about severing of family ties. And they said it overwhelmed their digital system, the response, a number of people that wrote in and responded about divorcing their families as adults, wanting to get away from their fathers permanently, not understanding why they couldn't get their mothers to leave, even when they were relocated. And they just said, you know what, I can't do it. And the response was profound for me, because I read the New York Times, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, and I mean this as I've grown older, that people are experiencing this as a regular and normal part of their daily lives. This is not incidental. This is not just an oddball occurrence, that this is something they have to anticipate and live with. If dad comes home drunk, he's gonna beat mom. If dad comes home medicated, he's gonna beat mom. And you can hear through the walls, you can hear the screaming, the crashing. And I say to myself, how do we change that so that we can have a better future for our children? Because at some point they are going to become adults themselves. And if that's all they know, they're going to replicate that.
Yep.
And they probably are going to replicate it more harshly than what they saw. When I think about the young people killing, and I'm like, what kind of home did you come out of? What kind of a family dynamic? So by the time, moving ahead, because this is so interesting, with the Artemis and you doing the hotlines, tell me how that works.
So it depends.
Take a deep breath.
So it depends on what people are calling us for. So again, they might just want to know is this domestic violence? Is this real? They might want help with the protection order. Like, how do I go about this? And we will walk through the process with them.
Okay.
Again, we'll talk about safety planning. And one of the questions we ask, are you comfortable calling 911? Because we know some folks, the police are not safe.
Whoa, the police are not safe because of
Past experience.
past experiences.
And I think in our African American cultures, victims are said, are you going to turn the white man on me, right? And so now
we are into that.
now we're into that. And now do I want to, and we know black men are killed at a higher rate. So do I want to call the police
And have him in a box.
and have him in a box? Not really. I just
Yeah.
want the violence to stop.
Right.
So
Right.
it depends on who's calling. And a lot of times it's for support. Like sometimes people will call us, especially in the middle of the night, and they have said to us, "I'm just calling you because I want to pick up the phone and call him," which is a great call us. We'll talk to you.
Right, right.
We'll do that. But again, it's validating the feelings because it goes back to that crazy making, and so we can say to them, "This is not your fault. You didn't deserve this. That you really are on the right path."
You know, that's very, very encouraging, and I appreciate your transparency as it relates to African American women and the dilemma that they find themselves in, emotionally and community-wise, because there's been a tacit, from the pulpit down, a tacit acceptance of her lot. Which is, we're going to pray about it. And my whole response is, while he goes to jail. You know? We're praying hard for you while you are behind bars. And I understand what it does, but there has to be, at some point, and I'm going to talk with you about this, accountability. Does society not believe you're accountable for these acts of violence? I mean, is that the message we're sending out, which is, he'll calm down.
Right.
He'll calm down. You just be a dutiful wife, girlfriend. Just leave him alone for a minute. You know how men are. And I'm like, as advanced as our system is with artificial intelligence, digital, social media, all these parameters that say that we are an advancing society, but we can't seem to resolve something as basic as, why do you have an urge to beat the person you love up? I just don't get it. Right. So there's got to be something else happening. So give me an example. Again, you counsel them. What are some of the calls that you think you've been involved in where, as a result of them being able to talk to you, they're still alive today? Have you had any of those happen?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think we have to own the fact that it's a pretty thankless job, and we understand that, right? We get it.
This conversation for some people is like, I don't want to hear that.
Right.
I'm like,
right.
But your next door neighbor,
right?
Or maybe you.
Yep.
You got to hear it. You're gonna hear it. Get over it. Okay.
So I think sometimes we've been able to put a mom, her kids, or put them on a bus and get them out and get them back to where their families are. Get them where they're safe. So they are surrounded by that community that's going to support them and hold the abuser accountable to make sure that they're safe and put eyes on her.
I like that. So you'll get them tickets and food vouchers and send them to their home. So you have to involve the family.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. We also do a support group at Artemis, which I think is so profound because
Tell me more.
Because it's a group of survivors that are sitting around a room talking about their experiences, and everyone's at different spots in their relationship. So somebody might just have left a relationship, somebody might have been out for 2 years. We've had people call us years after they left saying, I'm having some bad memories. I'm having some
Oh my God,
post-traumatic stress about this.
Yes, that's real.
Can I come? So there's people sitting around the room talking, and it's almost like, your batterer said that to you? He said it to me.
Right.
And so
shared
it's
experiences.
the shared experience.
Yes.
It's the validation that I'm not crazy, that I'm not alone, that this wasn't my fault, that other people have lived through it and are doing okay.
And that, I think, is key, because the message in that type of a gathering is that not only can you survive a horrific life story, but you can thrive.
You can thrive.
You can become a testament, a support for other people that are having the same experience.
Yes.
And that to me is very, very important. Do you all stress to them, in these group settings, the necessity psychologically for forgiveness? Or do you just tell them to get on with your life? How does that work?
That's a loaded question.
I know it is. I like those kind of questions. I do. Okay.
Well, we really work again from you don't have to forgive to move on.
I'm not, I'm putting it out there.
So
I'm just putting it out there.
So we really say you don't have to forgive. It's because everybody was like, you got to forgive them.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No.
You can learn to live with it and continue moving forward. For some people, it's important, and that's great. We're not saying don't forgive them. We're just saying I think we live in a society where and I love me some Brene Brown, right? Like I
got it.
Right?
Got it.
But I think for survivors, you're living with this person day in and out, and you're being traumatized every day by this person who's supposed to love you and protect you and support you. And that didn't happen. And you get to be angry about that, and you get to be upset. And there's nothing saying, oh, you have to forgive that person. It's your call.
Wow. I'm glad to hear you say that. That's going to liberate a lot of you. If you've been treated like a broke down dog, and you're able to limp away or run away or flee for the hills, forgiveness can be a trigger. It can be a trigger. And I'm not saying that you're able to do that. Perhaps over time, and perhaps never. God judge. But whatever you do, heal yourself. Do whatever's going to be required to get healing for your soul, which is in a million pieces all over the place. And there's no requirement that you ever, I'm speaking as a woman, not as a trained anybody. It's no requirement that you say, I forgive you. But I do know that forgiveness is also about forgiving yourself. That's important.
It is, because again, batters are telling us how horrible we are, and so we blame ourselves.
Right.
And so it is important to realize, I say it all the time, you did the best you can in that situation, and you did well, right?
I think so. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
Can you believe that my producer says we are out of time? We haven't even got this is what I need. Just to wrap up.
Sure.
What would you say, what are the statistics real quick on battering?
So one in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 3 teens are experiencing domestic violence.
1 in 3 teens. And that your challenge as we look at this changing world model is what, before we conclude and give them your phone number?
I think you touched on it, right? Like this is a community issue. This isn't a behind closed doors family issue. We are all affected, and we all have to get involved in order to stop domestic violence.
Well, there you got it. You got it from a person who does this every day and has done this every day for 27 years. She is to be commended, because myself, I'd be doing serious jail time. I would. We'll talk about that on my next show, because I actually did house, in the day, a woman and her children in my home who were experiencing domestic violence. And the unthinkable happened, which is she let him in my house while I was gone to the office. And that's a whole nother story. But I thank you for being a faithful viewer of The Power of Money as we do a deep dive into domestic violence. And I also want to thank our wonderful guest, Jane Keiffer, who is Executive Director of the Artemis Center. What is the phone number there, please?
You can call our hotline at 937-461-4644. 4357, and 4357 spells help. So 937-461-HELP.
And may I encourage all of you that are listening in that this show airs all over the United States now, and I can assure you that in most of your major markets, there are people that are concerned and want to help you. And I'm going to ask you to reach out via internet, via your local resource centers, and get someone who can help you. There is another way to live. I'm telling you, there is another way to live. You can survive. Thank you for listening in to today's segment of The Power of Money, Domestic Violence, Part 1. I'll talk to you soon. God bless you and you take care. Bye-bye.